First, I would like to thank Emily Jones and the rest of the Rhode Island Interfaith Coalition to Reduce Poverty Steering Committee for this distinct honor and privilege to be able to share with you this morning. I am humbled and overwhelmed with the magnitude of the task before me. Second, I would like to greet all of you, my brothers and sisters, and say good morning. Good morning. Doesn't it just make a difference being able to greet one another? I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that my mother, Sheila McCalister, is here, so I just thank her for being present. So for those of you who don't know, that's part of that Baptist protocol where you acknowledge everyone. Today, in terms of getting to my task, I would like to reflect on the topic, in my own shoes. Or you can think of it as, in your shoes. Have you ever heard the phrase or the idiom, put yourself in someone else's shoes? You know, it's a metaphor that invites us to allow ourselves to put ourselves and see someone else's experience and someone else's point of view. It serves as a challenge for us to be sensitive to the needs of others, to understand their plight and their journey, to try to understand their cultural context and their cultural backgrounds and the social economic conditions that they came from, to unearth the systemic influences and confluences and structures that have paved the road for which those shoes have walked upon. But if we are honest with ourselves, we do not often try to put somebody else's shoes on. The size is not right. They're either too big or too small, too tight or too loose. We're not able to have our own footing when we're wearing someone else's shoes. Yet and still, that phrase is appropriate because it sensitizes us to the fact that we do have to consider someone else's struggle, someone else's hardship, and think about walking in someone else's shoes. Yet it is through this intentional exercise of seeing situations from someone else's point of view that we are and grow more compassionate, that we are indeed able to advocate for the rights of others. As you have already heard, the issue of poverty is no different. When we hear statistics like 14.3% of Rhode Islanders are living in poverty, or that 1 in 5 children live in poverty, or that 1 in 8 households lack adequate food, and that since the recession, that the number of Rhode Islanders enrolled in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program has doubled. It's 174,000 individuals. Over 60,000 people a month access food from Rhode Island Community Food Bank. These statistics indicate the necessity of both government programs, community-based organizations, and faith-based institutions together working to help provide shelter for the vulnerable. Talking about vulnerability is not easy, especially in our culture and our society. No one wants to show a weakness. And most of us can hide our vulnerabilities behind our clothes, behind our degrees, behind our places of communities. But those in which we fight for, they can't hide those vulnerabilities. They're in the open for all of us to see. So we come to understand this issue of poverty is pervasive, and it has rippling effects on the well-being of not only those who are vulnerable, but all of us as a community. We see that in education, in healthcare, in criminal justice implications. The need indeed is great. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. once said that we are all interconnected. His letter from the Birmingham jail states, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And it makes me think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs that talks about people and how we possess a set of motivations and how indeed we have to be able to have not only our emotional needs taken care of, we have to have safety, love, and esteem, and growth needs, that self-actualization, which indeed is really what the title is all about, walking in your own shoes. Likewise, the Rhode Island Interfaith Coalition to Reduce Poverty has adopted as its core the 5 fundamentals: affordable housing, nutritious food, access to health care, equitable education, and work with decent wages. Thus, based on this understanding and these underlying fundamental needs, we are all able to craft and shape how we seek to work together. But underneath these principles is a belief system, perhaps a faith foundation that undergirds us, sustains us, and challenges us to engage in meaningful and necessary work. Yet, this work depends on our ability to walk in somebody else's shoes, to have keen vision, to see that we are all in this fight together. But if we're honest, again, sometimes we have to acknowledge that it's hard to see someone else's perspective, that it's hard to perceive someone else's attitudes, their actions, and to advocate on their behalf in order to augment the effects of our policies, our politics, our passions, and our common purpose. In Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point, How Little Things Can Make a Big Difference, he says, ideas, products, and messages, and behavior spread just like viruses do. If one takes a dramatic moment, then everything can change all at once. That is, in fact, the tipping point. This is our moment to tip the scales and on behalf of those who have been oppressed, to tip the scales for those who have been not able to be seen, for those times when we have closed our eyes to the needs of others, for those times when we have refused to see the hurt and the pain around us. But today, we are challenged and we are compelled to see more and to do more. Let me tell you a story of a little girl born with curly, kinky hair, born with the kiss of the sun-scorched skin, one of 5 children raised by a single female parent, a mother whose lack of education and access to child care limited her ability to provide for her family, a parent whose pride and dignity prevented her from seeking governmental assistance. This child grew up in poverty, moving from place to place because of a lack of affordable housing. A child who experienced living without heat, water, and electricity. A girl whose education system failed her. Yet she was one of 400 to graduate from a freshman class of 1,200. We can see the impacts of what poverty does. In my particular faith tradition, I'm reminded of Philippians 2. There's a passage that says, if there is any encouragement in Christ, if any comfort of love, if any fellowship of the Spirit, if any compassion and mercy, then fulfill my joy and be like-minded, having the same love, being in unity with one mind. Let nothing be done out of strife or conceit, but in humility, let each esteem the other better than himself. Let each of you look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but he emptied himself, taking upon himself the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. And being found in the form of man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the death, even the death on the cross. Now, I recognize that again is from my particular faith tradition, but I believe that particular passage lifts up the concept of vulnerability. Being willing to be vulnerable, being willing to see the hurt and the pains of someone else. As I talked about that young child, did you come up with a face or a name or someone that you know who has had those type of struggles? For I know that because poverty is so pervasive, this is a familiar story. It's a story that we don't need to put a face or a name to in order to make it palatable. But it's only when we see the faces of those we know, the faces of our neighbors, the faces of our friends, our families, and our loved ones, are we really moved to compassion to help the girl who lived in a situation filled with vulnerability. She was vulnerable to the systemic systems that limited her possibilities, her housing, her education, her access to food, her access to health care. By hearing her story, I believe it can awaken within us the ability to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, but also to name for ourselves the shoes that we have that are tattered and torn, the places where we've journeyed that are worn. And it encourages us that we too can put our own shoes on, that we can claim our own stories, no matter where they come from. It is important that we reclaim our struggles and reclaim our faith, that we are able to change the world around us. However, we have been mobilized or transported to this common objective, this common core principle, this common issue, we find ourselves at the same destination, fighting for poverty. So whether you wear stilettos, LL Beans, gym shoes, sandals, or you like walking barefoot, we have to respond to the movement that is among us, to the presence to know that we must keep moving, we must keep walking, we must keep advocating, we must keep praying, we must keep believing. Your involvement makes a difference, for you are part of the solution. If I were to use the acronym, SHOES simply means showing humility to others every day solves problems. By walking in your own shoes, you give voice to those who need encouragement. You give voice to the issue that resonates with us all, which is why we're here this morning. We give voice to the hope and the knowledge that what we do makes a difference. I can say that with confidence because that little girl in the story is me. I know because people advocated in situations for me that it makes a difference. So not only does it empower me to tell my story, but I know there are many, many, many stories out among us. However you have travailed in this life, the good news is that hunger is a solvable problem. The work that we do does make a difference. The good news is that whatever tools we have in our faith tool bag to motivate us, to refuel us, to refocus us, to reconnect us to our purpose, it's worth it. Because as we continue to do the work, we see the results. You make a difference, and your work is valued, and your work is appreciated, and I just want to acknowledge that I appreciate all of you representing the good work that when we put our hands together, what a difference it will make. And you can do it walking in your own shoes.